Let's say you're really concerned about social and environmental problems, human rights abuses, climate change, the loss of entire species, discrimination against people, perhaps on the grounds that they're disabled. You want to do something to help address these problems. But you rapidly realize that what you can do working as an individual is limited. You need to join with others who share similar concerns. So you support a charity. Maybe you even go and work for one. You do these things, but still it seems that there isn't sufficient pressure brought to bear on business leaders or politicians to enact the changes that you see would be necessary if we were to respond proportionally to these problems. So you're obliged to ask yourself, what is it that would broaden and deepen public care about other people and about the world, the natural world around us? And in asking that question, a question which many charities ask, you may well turn to an industry which really understands people's motivation, the marketing industry. And so, like many charities, you may enlist the help of marketeers in the course of asking, how do we motivate people to lobby their MPs? How do we motivate people to donate to a charity? Seeing that perhaps the way in which you motivate people to do those things is perhaps in some way analogous to the way in which you motivate a person to buy a holiday or a particular brand of perfume. So you invite marketing agencies to advise you, and they're likely to tell you at least two things. The first thing they're going to tell you is, make it easy. Whatever you're doing, however you want people to help you in your campaign, make sure that it's simple for them to do it. They should be able to lobby their MP at the click of a mouse. They should be able to donate almost without realizing they're doing it. It's called frictionless giving. And the second thing that they may tell you is, don't get hung up on the motivations that you appeal to. Assume that most people you're communicating with don't really care all that much, and therefore appeal to their self-interest. Point out the money that they may save. Enlist the help of celebrities. Make your campaigns cool and sexy. Or if you're asking people to donate, entwine those invitations to donate with shopping. Perhaps set up a charity credit card scheme, for example. So this is what I call the conscience industry. It knows its markets. It understands how to engage people as consumers. It's unfettered by any anxiety to encourage people to express concern for the right reasons. And it works with, rather than against, apathy. I'm going to spend the next few minutes telling you why I think this is counterproductive. In the course of doing so, I'm going to draw on some recent research in social psychology, and I've brought somebody along to help me in this. I'd like you to meet Edward. He's not the slightest bit shy, actually. He really relishes standing in front of large audiences, telling them what he thinks, safe in the understanding that he's not going to be interrupted. And he's kindly volunteered for us to look inside his head and see what it is that motivates him to express care for other people and for nature. Now, I should point out at this stage that this isn't an anatomically accurate representation of Ed's brain, or anybody else's from that point of view. These different coloured balloons are my attempt to represent different groups of values, what social psychologists see as being the principles, the guiding principles in life, which underpin our attitudes and many of our behaviours. So, for example, the red balloon there perhaps represents a group of values related to hedonism and excitement and stimulation. And the blue balloon there perhaps a group of values related to safety and security and health. But, and it seems that those values are common to tens of thousands of people in dozens of different countries. We all have all those groups of values, and we access them at different points over the course of our lives. But I want to talk about just two of those. One is what social psychologists refer to as extrinsic values. These are concerns about social recognition, public image, achievement, success, and wealth. And I'd like to show you what happened when I took Ed here out of his back. Remember, Edward quite likes talking to large audiences. It puffs him up a little bit. And this is what happens to his extrinsic values, which are represented by that little purple balloon down there. He comes out of his bag, and the importance that he attaches to those extrinsic values increases as he sees where he is. I've represented that increased importance by the larger balloon here. But take a look at that again, because you see that as the importance that he attaches to those extrinsic values increases, the importance that he attaches to the values represented by that green balloon decrease. And that green balloon represents a group of values referred to as intrinsic values. These are values related to caring, a concern for social justice or protection of the environment, helpfulness, community. And it seems that there's this antagonistic relationship between these two sets of values. To the extent that one becomes more important, the importance that you attach to the other diminishes. Now, there are a number of different experiments which illustrate this empirically. I'm going to tell you about just one, which was conducted by Professor Greg Mayo and colleagues at the University of Cardiff. Greg invited a bunch of participants into his lab, and he divided them into 3 groups. In one group, he invited to memorize some words associated with food, veggie pizza, a ham sandwich. The second group, he invited to memorize some words associated with those more helpful intrinsic values, words like trustworthiness, helpfulness. And the third group, he invited to memorize words associated with those more self-interested extrinsic values, words like capable and successful and achieving. And then a little later on, he said to these people, I'm running another study next week. I'm sorry, I don't have any funds, but I'd really like you to come back and help me. I can't pay you, but would you volunteer to come back next week and give me some of your time? And if so, how much time would you be willing to give? And these are the results he found. Those people who he'd asked to memorize words associated with food, so in a sense his control group, if you like, those people who hadn't either been asked to think about intrinsic or extrinsic related words, were quite generous. They donated, they said they'd volunteer for about 40 minutes or so. Those people who'd been asked to reflect or to memorize words associated with those more helpful intrinsic values, they offered considerably more time, well over an hour. But what about those people who'd been asked to memorize words associated with extrinsic values? Well, Greg predicted, given his understanding of how values work, that in exercising those values, those extrinsic values, it would reduce the importance that these participants placed on those more helpful intrinsic values, and therefore reduce the amount of time that they offered to help. And that's exactly what he found. They offered to help for significantly less time. So going back to Ed, we can see then that the environment he's in, what he's doing at any one particular point in time, is likely to engage particular values, which in turn have an impact on the attitudes that he holds and the behaviours that he engages. But it's also really important to realise that Ed holds some values in a more general or dispositional way. Some values are of importance to him in the longer term. And this is really important because to the extent that Ed holds intrinsic values to be more important, he's more likely to vote for politicians who say that they're going to take serious action to address social or environmental problems. He's more likely to hold those politicians to account. He's more likely to lobby them or to join demonstrations. He's more likely to volunteer. He's more likely to buy ethical goods or services. And he's more likely to incur personal inconvenience in the course of adopting socially or environmentally friendly behaviours. So it's really important then to ask, what is it that determines what values we hold to be important? In Ed's case, he was really well, it seems that values are like muscles. The more we exercise them, the stronger they become. And in Ed's case, he was really fortunate. He had an upbringing from loving, caring parents. He had a strong network of friends. He spent a lot of time outdoors in nature. He still does. He had quite a broad-minded, expansive education. And he's acquired an appetite for creativity. He's a jazz trumpeter at weekends. And these are all behaviours which are likely to exercise and therefore over time strengthen his intrinsic values. But it's also unfortunately the case that Ed was brought up in a society which does a lot to exercise his extrinsic values. He sees hundreds, perhaps thousands of advertisements a day which remind him that he should establish his social status or his image through the stuff that he consumes. He reads, listens to, or watches media, which constantly reminds him of the importance of a celebrity lifestyle. He's constantly reminded of the importance of economic competitiveness as the primary indicator of national progress. And he's frequently reminded that he's a consumer foremost and a citizen secondarily. Look at this graph. It shows the frequency of the use of the word citizen in the Times newspaper over the course of the last 60 years or so. And this line shows the frequency of the use of the word consumer. And that's important because studies show that to the extent that we're even subtly engaged as consumers, we're likely to attach greater importance to those more selfish extrinsic values, and we're likely to behave in less environmentally or socially friendly ways. So what are the implications of this? Going back to that question that we came up against at the start of how we broaden and deepen the care that we all express towards other people and the natural world. Well, I think there are two important implications. The first is this. We can't afford to focus narrowly on particular issues. Human rights abuses, loss of biodiversity. It's also important that we ask ourselves, what is it in society that exercises and over the course of time strengthens those helpful intrinsic values? And how can we promote those things further? And what is it in society which exercises and over the course of time strengthens those more selfish extrinsic values? And what can we do to reduce those influences? This might mean, for example, that we campaign for programs to develop empathy in schools. Or it may mean that we campaign for the replacement of GDP as a primary indicator of national progress with an indicator which is rooted in a deeper understanding of what really constitutes human well-being. Or it may mean that we campaign against exposing ourselves to the volume of advertising that we currently do, particularly exposing our children to that. The second implication is that whatever marketeers, and I'm convinced that marketeers have an awful lot that they can contribute to help charities, but whatever help they can offer, there's an important distinction between how they work and how you need to work if you're seeking to strengthen care about other people and the planet. Because if you're selling holidays or a particular brand of perfume, it really doesn't matter what values you appeal to. Whereas if you're fostering our care about other people, it's critically important what values you appeal to. Think of the number of times that you've been urged to adopt environmentally friendly behaviour on the basis it'll save money, or that you should express concern about the loss of British biodiversity on the grounds that it's economically important, or that you should be concerned that disabled people are extended equal rights to the rest of us on the grounds that they contribute a lot to national productivity. These are all arguments which serve to engage and exercise those more selfish, extrinsic values. And whatever the short-term benefits of such arguments, there may be some, there's good evidence that actually those benefits may not be as great as we imagine, but even if there are short-term benefits, it seems that in the longer term, they're likely to be counterproductive. You see, to the extent that the conscience industry engages extrinsic values, it's serving to cut from beneath us the branch upon which all concerned citizens sit. Thank you.